It's official. West Ham United have their first major summer signing if we ignore Jean-Claire Tadibbo. Frankie Dof is a hammer. What's your thoughts on this one?
I hadn't seen much of him, if I'm honest, but obviously as it's got closer and closer, there's been plenty of clips around of him. I think one of the things that you've just got to really buy into, we know you can see clips and everyone can look like a superstar, but it's just how fondly the fans thought of him. They obviously just had a really good connection with him. They obviously really rated him highly, and everything that they say is just positive, almost to the point they say, or I saw one comment that he's probably the best prospect that they've ever brought through at the club. So if he can give us any return on value like the other two boys that have come from there have, then it can only bode well.
An important deal for Potter and West Ham, I guess.
As we said before, and we've done Positivity Podcast, I'm just erring on the side of caution a little bit because I've still not seen us make a big move yet. And this guy, for all of the positivity around him, for it being a position that we need to strengthen and add to, I think it's a really good, positive move in that area of the pitch. But like we said, this should have been a deal. This deal should have been done the second the transfer window opened. We've got the connection with the club. We've done deals before. It should have been so easy. So the fact it's been this difficult, yeah, okay, we've got it over the line. You asked me last week, do we think it will get over the line? I said, yes, I think they'll be patient with us because of that historical relationship we've had. Okay, it got done. But let's go and see other moves now.
Do you think it was down to sort of bad negotiating, or do you think it was just down to the fact that we did actually have to sell before we buy?
Well, that's how it seems.
Yeah.
You put two and two together, the first signing comes in as soon as that deal, the other deal got done. So you can only say it makes sense. I still find it so hard to believe, but what else could you say? If you went against it, you'd probably in your heart feel like you may be being a bit naive. So
yeah, you've got to ignore the evidence, really, haven't you? Before it was reports, but now, like you said, we have sold Kudus. We didn't buy anyone until we sold Kudus. As soon as we sell Kudus, someone comes in. So it's hard to say, okay, that's not true, the sell before we buy thing. Whether or not you believe it's self-inflicted or a true reflection of the financial state, that's up for debate. But I think what has almost been confirmed to me now is that's the stance of the club. And I guess on one hand, the good thing is there's still a lot of leftover money there to go and get the next signing. I think my concern is that one or two more signings and that Kudus money's dried up and we're back to we need to sell before we buy. So I think the pressure is still on to get more players out the door, because what you don't want to do is get the next guy in, then you're back to that wall, which is we must sell before we buy again. You can't have that. So I think it's important that we keep the conveyor belt of players coming in. But in order to do that, I think it's also just as important we keep the players that we want to sell going out the door, so that we've always got that bit of money there for the transfer deal coming after the transfer deal we're currently working on, if that makes sense. I don't want to get into a situation where we sign another player and the club say, well, we're hoping to get these players in, but we can't until we sell. We've got off and running now, and I'm a bit concerned that the well may dry up pretty quickly, because 54 million is a lot of money for Kudus, but if Diouf is 19, 20 million, okay, there's still 35 there, but that's only potentially one signing. It depends who you buy, but that could be one signing, it could be two. Very quickly, someone else needs to get out the door. But anyway, first one is in. A couple of things I want to talk to you about, Frankie. Michail Antonio. What's your stance on him? Because obviously at the minute he's training with the club and that. I don't know if he's in Germany. I assume not, which is a surprise. I would have taken him personally, because if he wants a new deal, I'd have said, well, come on then, show us what you've got, kind of thing. The club have still got that offer on the table to him, which is, a much lower wage, but heavily incentivized by playing games, and Antonio's obviously holding out for a contract that would reflect a first-team player at West Ham and ignoring what has happened in the last year. What's your take on all this Antonio stuff?
Oh, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I've never really rated him as a striker. He's a ball in a china shop. He'd done a job for us when we kind of needed someone to do it. We'd done it with other players, with moving Arnautovic there and stuff like that. It to me was always, yeah, he's 100% man. He sort of, but just the way he plays wasn't my type of striker. I found him incredibly frustrating at times. I just feel like we've had our value out of him. I think I'm very much one of those people like the ship has sailed. For me, it's done. He's had his time, scored, goals that have been very important to us. Thank you very much. But really, we're an ambitious football club who are looking to the future. And again, like you said, we've got quite a lot of youngsters waiting in the wings. A crocked Antonio, who was looking like he was on the decline, in my opinion, in the last season that he had with us. I would much rather, and again, this is the context that I would put it into. So you sign Antonio, we don't sign another striker. Now what we've got is a situation where Antonio is in front of those youth prospects that we've got coming through. Antonio is playing a bit of a part. He ends up injured, which is highly possible now. And then because of that situation, you've then the youngster who could have been having a bit of minutes and been in and around the first team and actually could rely on them as somebody if we are desperate for another striker option. They haven't had that build-up of momentum. They haven't had that build-up of experience. They haven't been seeing any minutes on the pitch. I just would rather see one of the young lads start to get a bit of a chance. Rather than an Antonio you start to become a bit dependent on, which for whatever reason we always have done. All the time he's been around, we love depending on Mikel Antonio. And then all of a sudden we're relying on him through the season, and then he ends up breaking down and we're screwed and we're in a bad place. So I just don't really want to see it for that reason. And, I already feel that the reason why he stayed relatively injury-free before, he had a good run actually on Mikel Antonio's standard. Especially in that last period of David Moyes' tenure with us, it's because we didn't press. We didn't cover much ground as a team. When you look at the team as a whole, we didn't really, and I think that's why we stayed injury-free across the whole squad at that period of time. It wasn't like Leeds, who were renowned for breaking down because they're at it all the time and really exerting themselves as athletes, and that's why they got these injuries. We didn't cover any ground at all. We were very, very sit off. We didn't push, and I think that's why Antonio. But that become even more frustrating for me because I already find him lazy. I already found him quite difficult to watch, and then when the style of play that he was then in, it just wasn't for me. So yeah, I kind of thought we'd already seen the back of it. The fact that now he's still hanging around, to be honest, I think the writing's on the wall. He will end up with being involved somehow, but I'd rather we moved on.
Yeah, my opinion hasn't changed. I'm pleased he's still around in terms of doing his rehab at the club. I'm pleased that we're offering him the facilities and stuff to get back to where he feels he needs to be in order to get a contract elsewhere. I think the club would be more than fair giving him any form of contract. I personally wouldn't renew his contract. I'd say thank you very much. But do you know what I would do? Boyle Sports game against Lille. Is it Lille we're playing? It is Lille, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let him play that game. He can be a trialist. You don't have to be a West Ham. You can still legally be trialist and give him 10 minutes or something. I'd use that match as an opportunity to let him say goodbye to the West Ham fans and stuff like that, because he never got his moment, did he? You could argue that Creswell, Suvan, Fabianski didn't get as good a moment as they should have done, and I agree with that, but they still got something. And Antonio wasn't part of it, and I think, he's been a fantastic player for us. I think he's been like when you think about the player we bought and the player that he was at his best time during West Ham, an incredible player, an incredible servant for the club, and what he's given was superb and a big part of our modern history. So I'd like to see him go with a goodbye, but I don't want to see him get a new contract. I do suspect, though, that eventually he may start playing. And the thing is, I'd understand if Potter took him to Germany and said, right, well, grasshoppers at the weekend, we're going to give you 20 minutes at the end. You know, you telling us you're back and you're able to play Premier League football. We're going to treat you like a Premier League footballer. So there you go, get out there for half an hour and let's see what you can do. But the one thing I can't shake is that before all this, Antonio himself sat there on the podcast saying that he could only do an hour, then he's blown out his arse. And that's him. He was saying that, not you or me. Antonio himself was saying he struggles to do more than an hour. But he's still around. We'll have to wait and see. Bad news, though. George Earthy's picked up an injury. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's a shame that.
Yeah, it's just he was very unlucky last season at Bristol City. He got injured just as he was sort of breaking into the first team and on the verge of starting games. He picked up a small injury, out for a few games, but then he had to sort of begin the process of getting into the team again. And this is it. This is prime time for the youngsters, isn't it? This is your opportunity. And he's out, picked up a ligament injury. And it's nothing too serious. I think the expectation is he'll be out for 3, 4, 5 weeks or so, which takes you up until when the season started. So he's going to miss the whole pre-season for us, which is, I'm gutted for him actually, because I think he's one player that realistically could be thinking, if I show the gaffer what I've got, I'll be here next season. I'll be sticking around in the first team. So Potter's got a big decision to make with him, really, because he's almost got to decide whether to keep him or loan him out without getting to see him in pre-season. I think the pre-season was going to be the evidence, wasn't it, to show Potter what you can do. Doesn't have that now, so a bit of a blow. Yeah, I was disappointed when I read that, actually, because I think, well, who are you looking forward to seeing pre-season? Is there anyone in particular? Because Earthy was certainly on my, if I had 5 players, he was one of them.
No, you know how fond of him I am and how much I've enjoyed seeing his progression through the youth system. So he would have been top of my list, really, just because I think I've seen enough of the others and they probably had a little bit more of a run last season in the teams that they were in. Like you say, because he sort of almost broke into the first team, was looking really good. I think their fans really were excited by him, and then all of a sudden he sort of slipped away a little bit. So I think it's a shame, and I almost think that is, as harsh as it sounds, I think that's him done with a potential to be involved with the first team next season now.
I understand that, because it's a significant. It's not necessarily the injury; it's when he's injured, isn't it? This is it.
That's all it is. And I think now, if I'm Potter at this time, I'm using all these games to get myself ready for next season. You know, I want to start putting everything together now. I want to have a very, very clear vision of what's the squad's going to look like, and I want to be clear on everybody and made all my decisions before that first game starts. The fact that he probably isn't going to feature now until that, you know, if I was Potter, I'd already be saying go and find him somewhere for him to play his football next season, that will give him first team football that's going to help his development come along. Maybe we'll reassess it, you know, at Christmas or whatever then. But I think for now, I think him being involved in the first team, I think opportunity is, unfortunately, I think it's gone.
Would you like to know someone else I'm looking forward to in pre-season, Frankie? I'm going to assume you say yes while you're coughing.
Let's hear it, Joe. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it kills the podcast if you say no, because I don't know why. I've either just got to ignore you and carry on anyway, or we just wrap the podcast up now. But Tadibbo, I think even though we signed him a year ago, I'm still unsure if I like him or not, right? Because last year he didn't have a pre-season, he didn't have one at Nice, and he didn't have one at West Ham. So when he joined, he went straight into like Premier League football, and I think that really hindered him. And he finished a few games. There's a bit of a myth that he never completed 90 minutes ever for West Ham. That's incorrect. He did complete some, but it wasn't enough. There was plenty of games where coming to the hour mark, and then there was a 70-minute mark or whatever, that he was having to get hooked because he was knackered. And I'm unsure how much of it is down to just a lack of pre-season. I'm unconvinced it is, because I think, well, surely then, after August, September, October, by December, you're up and running then. You're up to like peak fitness. If you've got a bit of a slow process, okay. But at some point, you're then ready, right? But it felt like he never really was. So am I confident this preseason means we're going to get 90-minute Tadibbo from the first game of the season? No, but I am hopeful. I am hoping and going to give him the benefit of the doubt that it was mainly down to that. And he's spoken himself about how he played with injuries and stuff. And I'm just going to believe him because it's a nice thing to do, I guess, really. And it just makes sense, right? Why a player isn't playing 90 minutes every week. So I'm hoping that with the right summer behind him, we can have the player we thought we were signing, because he's had some good games, and there's at times he looks real quality, especially on the ball, really calm at the back, and I like that. I like defenders that look. Sometimes he looked a bit too laid back, but generally speaking, I was impressed with what I've seen. However, there was a few bad games in there as well, but I think I'm hoping for some big performances and a big season from Tadibbo, and I think if we can get that, our team performance will increase quite a lot because of just him improving. I don't think we saw the best of him, Frankie.
No, I don't think we've seen anywhere near the best of him. I think it was the Bournemouth night game that we had very early on in the season. He looked done after 30 minutes, like done. He was finished. And I was sitting there thinking, "Cool, mate, you're in trouble here because the game's barely got going and you're done." So
was that the cup game?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
So he really struggled in that game, really struggled. So yeah, he clearly wasn't fit at the start. It was a bit in and out. He is that sort of player. I think if anyone has the opinion that Aguerd wasn't right for the Premier League, I think it's a very easy comparison to make with Tadibbo because he is a very calm, ball-playing type centre-half. He isn't a Mavropanos. He isn't that way. He is someone who should be able to get you playing a bit of football, really, which is exactly what we need. And when you play in a system that Potter does, with the right players around him or Aguerd, you should be able to have a player like that in the team because you shouldn't worry about their aerial ability because one of your other centre halves should be the one who's commanding your box from corners and whatever else. So I feel like there's a place for somebody. In fact, not just a place. I feel like someone like that's important in a Potter type system to get the ball moving from the back, and someone who's also comfortable with driving out of defence because the other defenders can tuck in or the wide players can tuck in if he does go on a bit of a drive out from the back. So yeah, I think someone like him's important, and it isn't to me just about whether he'll be ready. I think it's us finding that balance with all of our defence, to be honest. It's finding the right combination of those players that suit and gel together and become a bit of a defensive unit. I think we've got the players there to do it, but it's whether Potter can find that bit of form in them. And I know everyone always says, you've got to look at the players. Yes, Tadibbo's got to be ready. He's got to be fit. He's got to have done all that hard work in pre-season and have the right attitude. But the buck always stops with the manager. It is up to Potter this season to find not just Tadibbo, but an entire defensive system that is going to gel together and make us solid defensively. But I also think we need to start moving that ball far, far quicker up the pitch because we know how much we struggled with creating chances. And that all started at the back for me. I thought we was too slow to move the ball forward.
Do you think he'll benefit if we are going to play a back three? Do you think he'll benefit from Creswell not being in defence? Because obviously he had that role of coming out and doubling up down the left-hand side. So do you think it's possible the next season we'll see, at present, I know Garrett's here, but I still want to sell him. But I think it's possible we'll see Kilman, Mavropanos and Tadibbo's got the role of coming out of the defence with it and pushing on down that right-hand side.
I think it makes sense. I do. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think you've got a lot of balance then between those three at the back. And you can, it doesn't have to be defensive in that context. If he is driving out from the back and then you've got those other two centre-halves there, I think it could work really well. And like you say, that was all my criticism of Cresswell being there last season, really, just because you only need one weak link within that back line, and it can really stop it functioning as it should. So I'm quite looking at what we've got there now and the defensive options we have. It should be one of our strengths. It really should. With Wan-Bissaka, you know, the likes of Tadibbo, with Kilman, with the new guy coming in. Yeah, I expect to see big things from that defensive unit, to be honest. And on that first game that we see, or in fact, it starts before then, doesn't it? In pre-season,
Yeah.
I want to see that looking good.
He's took a couple of youngsters out with him as well. There's quite a few youngsters in Germany at the minute in the pre-season camp, so I think it's fair to expect a few of them. Maybe you might even get to see Cornet on Saturday, Frankie.
Oh, what is all that about? I just can't even believe that man's back. It's
back. You never know.
Unbelievable.
Speaking of pre-season, you've been watching a few videos. Is it getting your... Well, actually, before we do that, where are we on the old camel meter? Are we more chilled out now that Doof is done?
Like I say, for me, I'm still bang in the middle. I haven't calmed anymore because, like I said at the beginning, I feel like we should have seen more by now.
Yeah.
So I'm still very much teetering on that halfway point, and it's going to take a little bit more than what we've done so far to calm it down a little bit.
I think I'm a 4. I'm chilled out, but it's now what we're going to go do now. This was an easy deal to get done because Slavia Prague were itching to sell, we were wanting to buy, and he wanted to come to West Ham. And when that happens, it's a pretty straightforward negotiation, really, because you all want the same thing. What is more difficult is when you're going after a player that is maybe unsure, or the club you're going after doesn't want to sell him, or you've got competition from other clubs and you're going after the same player and you may be getting involved in a bidding war. That's when you'll get tested from a negotiating standpoint. I think this was a straightforward transaction to do. And I think maybe that's why it took so long. I think maybe West Ham were quite calm. It was going to get done anyway. So it was like, well, we can take our time on this because he is coming to us. We just need to sort out a few things. But the next one will be interesting as to who it is as well and what position we're going to go for, because I'm not 100% convinced that the left wing back was the priority position to solve. I think I had a few more that I would have liked to have seen sorted first, but fair enough. But now I know you'll be itching to see the striker next, but I'm itching to see the central midfielder next. But what neither of us are itching to see is that centre back or the right back that can cover for Wan-Bissaka when he's not here and stuff like that. So I think what we'll be telling is the next player we go for and how successful we are at bringing him in quite quickly. I'll be surprised and impressed if we've got another new signing this time next week. In a week's a long time in football, especially in a transfer window. But if we've got another signing in by then, and we should have, by the way. I'm not saying we should have. I'm saying we need to get them in quick. But I'll be quite, okay, here we are. We mean business now. We're getting things going. So the first one's in. That's great. Let's get the next one. You've been watching a few pre-season videos, though. Is it getting your excitement up? Are you starting to feel it?
Yeah, I am. I mean, how much of it is for the cameras? I'm not 100% sure. I watched the sort of start of the training camp, and everyone seems in very good spirits. And then they did a day in the life of Fukrug, and if there was any doubts as to whether or not he wanted to play his football at West Ham next season, I'm totally over that now.
You're buying into it, aren't you?
I am a little bit. I'm trying to dumb it down a little bit, Geo, because I was never convinced when we signed him that he was the man for us. However, like I said to you before, attitude and commitment is the most important things. And I really do feel that he's switched on. I feel like he's almost got a bit of he wants to prove a point. He wants to prove that this is his level and he can do it, you know?
It's also World Cup year, right? This is important. And he's got a shirt in the Germany squad at the minute. But there's a couple of good young German strikers who will be looking at Fukrug thinking, all right, Granda, out the team, we're coming in now. So it's his shirt to lose. But if he's he either picks up an injury or he's not in great form, he may very well find himself missing out on going to the World Cup, and that will be his ambition. And it doesn't bother me if you said to Fukrug right now, what do you want to achieve in the next 12 months? If his answer was go to the World Cup, that's not offensive to me, because I think playing for your country at the World Cup should be the pinnacle, right? But if you're going to get there, that means you're going to have to give everything. In the meantime, you're going to have to give everything to West Ham. You're going to have to perform really well. This isn't a player who perhaps is the star player for his country and he just walks into it anyway. This is a guy that is usually in the squad, has been in the squad, the latest squad, which was the Nations League. The semi-final, which they lost, he didn't start. He came off the bench, but he didn't start. That was Germany's first 11. He was not in there. And he's always had that sort of super sub role for Germany. But with the progress of Voltemad, who's likely to sign for Bayern Munich now he was also in the senior squad, so there's room for both of them. But Fukrug's pecking order, if you like, is maybe just under a little bit of pressure now with him in particular. So he needs to have a good season for West Ham just to make sure that he's on that plane to go to the World Cup. He should be. But if he has a bad season, I think he could lose that place pretty quickly. And as a result of that, I'm expecting a real fired up, motivated Fukrug this season. I'm excited for him. Apparently, Potter's been impressed by his attitude and whatnot in training, which is good, because I wouldn't say they got off on the wrong foot per se, but I think Fukrug calling out the teammates didn't go down too well with Potter. But he'd only been here a couple of months at that point, Potter, maybe 3 months. When was it? April time, late April, maybe it happened. They're still working out their relationship. They're still not quite sure about each other. Now they've had the summer. I expect Potter to have a better understanding of Fukrug and vice versa. And if you can do that, if you can understand the character behind a player, you can sometimes get the best out of them. And Harry Redknapp will be the first one to tell you, sometimes you've just got to make exceptions for one or two players. We all got told about Carlos Tevez, how he just wouldn't bother his arse in training. He turned up late, didn't put any effort in, but on a Saturday, he was the best player on the pitch. And it's one of them that you've got to go, right, okay, it's not ideal, but you've just got to allow it because he's so bloody good. And I'm not saying that's what Potter will do with Fukrug, but what I'm trying to suggest is that perhaps Potter will just understand Fukrug a little bit better, know how to manage him a bit better. And it's a bit like Moyes with Arnautovic. He wouldn't have been an easy character to manage. He was sulky and he was petulant. I bet at times Moyes wanted to go on the pitch and wring his bloody neck. I did. But if you know how to handle him and get the best out of him, you will really benefit from that. So that's my hopes this summer, really, that them two in particular really develop a strong relationship, because he can be one of the leaders at the club as well. I still want to sign a striker, but
yeah, I mean, I was very caught out by his personality, actually. I think it's you've got a big F in German, and how you kind of stereotype German personalities to be. And then also with what he come out and said, and he was quite blunt in that interview he did. And actually, he is an absolute funny character who is just messing around, smile on his face. In fact, if you wanted to have a character that made almost added in, it's not lightheartedness, because he isn't someone who's there just messing around, but he's someone who would make your day at training more enjoyable. That's what he is.
He's got a big personality, hasn't he? But when the going gets tough or whatever, he turns on, he's Mr. Serious. But when you're in an environment which is you can be a little bit more fun, he's got that side to him as well. And I think Noble was like that as well. I think Noble was one of the jokers of the pack and stuff. But then when it came down to the nitty gritty and the serious side of it, he was Mr. Sternface and so on and so forth. And I like it. I've got hopes for Fukrug this season.
I've definitely warmed to him.
I'm loving this Frankie.
I'm quite happy he's around now. And look, I had my opinions on him last season, and I stood by that. And
you weren't wrong. He didn't. He was out for ages and whatever.
But I actually feel now, and like you've said many a times, I've not changed my opinion on whether he was the right man at the time for us to bring in. I still think he was the wrong man. I think that played into a big part of why we had such a poor season, to be honest. But times change, and this is a new season. You know, it's a bit of a, I hope they're treating it as a bit of a fresh start, because we can almost draw a line under that start that Potter had and said, let's go again. Forget about that. That's done. You know, he came in at a very awkward time, a lot of turmoil at the club. Things were rocky with the Paqueta situation and all that stuff. It weren't easy. So draw a line under it. We'll go again. And yeah, I've got a very, very different opinion on how useful I think he can be to us next season. Now, I actually think he's going to play a big part. And if we were having the bet again, Geo, I would be on the other side of it this time. I think he just might go and get 10 goals.
Love that. Absolutely love that. I hope on Saturday, Frankie, I get a text from you and it says, mate, Fukrug looks really good. He scored a couple of goals. This is the guy. This is the guy. First impressions mean a lot to Frankie. I'll tell people that. And it's almost like you're starting again this summer, isn't it? It's new first impressions. So Fukrug looks sharp against Grasshoppers, bangs in a couple. Next week, Frankie's going to be buzzing about Fukrug, and I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, shall we leave there, my friend?
Sounds good.
Well, we'll be back later this week with a positivity podcast. So at least we've got a couple of things we could. To be fair, I think this has almost been half a positivity podcast, isn't it? It's been
balanced.
Yeah, it's been all right. We're feeling good at the moment, I think. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please do drop a like on it. It's going to Hammers Chat myself, Frankie. Catch you later in the week.